Good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Chris Ames here. Hope you're doing well and looking forward to today's Inner Circle. I'm certainly excited today. I think it's going to be an amazing one because we are joined by the legend that is Stuart. Hello, Stuart. How are you?
Hi, Chris. I don't think I've been described as a legend before, but I mean,
It's always the first time, mate.
it's
It's always the
yeah.
first time. And today,
There are some legends about me, but I'm not normally a legend.
now that makes me curious. What legends are about you?
Well, we'll get into it in a bit, Chris. But I was a scientist in my former career, which is why I end up sort of branding myself the scientific value builder. And I was working in one particular hospital where I had a piece of equipment going inside a particular type of space where you were not supposed to have heat. And unfortunately, I decided to put it in there because I thought it was a bit dangerous.
Right.
And unfortunately, an alarm went off, which I ignored. Virtually the half of the hospital I was in was evacuated, and eventually a large man with a fire, complete breathing apparatus and everything else, sort of stormed into my lab and said, "So you're the stupid bleep 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 that sort of caused this problem?" And I looked at him and went, "Oops, sorry."
Does that happen a lot?
Well, it didn't happen. It didn't happen a lot after that, Chris. I'll promise you. That was
No.
the only time it happened to me. That was the one time that I was hauled in front of several important people, asking what the heck I thought I was doing. But
I suppose it's
there
a
are.
lesson learned, right? And one thing I was thinking about this morning was so I'm cycling into work at the minute, and we said earlier on that it might not be the right weather because even though it's meant to be summer, it's a little bit damp out there. But you know what I was thinking? I'm currently, thank you, Charlotte. I've just got my coffee, so that's good news. I'm currently back to listening to albums in their entirety.
Yeah.
And what I've been trying to do is pick albums that really feel good to get me set up in the morning. And this morning it was Scouting for Girls' first album, 2008, brilliant album. What's the music that like really gets you going in the morning?
Do you know? Do you know? So it's probably singing, and I do a lot of a cappella type singing. So for me, it's some really quite weird stuff that you probably never heard of. But there's a group I'm listening to at the moment who are absolutely fantastic. They do a lot of humorous stuff. Um, called Vocal Spectrum. They're very good. And the thing that I like about it is you've got to balance the great music, but at the same time still try and be funny. And it's a difficult balancing act. I love people trying to achieve those two things.
Oh, and humor in music is amazing, isn't it? You know, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah. And that
absolutely
if you want
love
to
that.
you want to find a way of getting you up in the morning and getting you going, it's got to be something humorous and something with a bit of drive to it. So yeah,
Yeah,
I can see
exactly.
what you're talking about.
100%. And if you're watching on LinkedIn or Facebook, where I think we're hosting this, I'd love to hear what songs get
Ooh.
you up and motivated in the morning. So feel free to share that. That's the question for today's Cervello Live. We're going to be interviewing Stuart and finding out a lot about his business, how he helps people and what he does. But because Stuart takes a holistic and complete approach to the businesses it's helping, I thought it'd be useful to share some of the things that you might want to consider when thinking about your financial plan in a bit of a sort of a helicopter view way. So I want to share what we consider at Cervello is a complete approach, and I want to share that with you. Now, Raz, can you share the presentation with me? Yeah, great, thank you. So if you don't know who I am and you've tuned in and are really curious, my name's Chris Dames. Most important job in my life is dad. Everything I do, both personally and professionally, is trying and learning and failing and trying again to be a better dad. And I live by values that I try and teach my kids, which is have fun every day, focus on getting a little bit better, focus on improvement, fairness, be transparent and do things that you feel are right. and do well, do good. And interestingly, those values that I tried to teach the kids, I apply in my own business as well. So when you come and see us at Cervello, all of those elements apply. I'm the director of a financial planning, chartered financial planning business called Cervello. And my day job is spent helping clients navigate that what happens next moment, that moment where you go, I think I need to think about what happens next in my life. I'm thinking about what I need to do in terms of making sure I'm financially ready for that. And I need to think a bit more about this. But over the past year, I've been thinking a lot. And Raz, can you just close the presentation down for me? Fab. Over the last year and a bit, I've been thinking a lot about whether that's enough. And I want to tell you a story about a client that I spoke to that probably changed my perspective on this quite a bit. So had a client come to see me and said, I've got two financial priorities. I want to make sure that I'm never going to run out of money again. But I've also got an adult autistic son that I need to make sure that he's cared for financially for his life, because it's unlikely that he'll be able to build a career that's going to guarantee him financial independence. Now, this guy had built wealth, done really well, built financial independence, and we managed through the cash flow tools we used to show him that he'd actually never run out of money again. He was going to be okay, and better than that, his son was going to be okay as well if we managed it well and we sort of stuck with the plan. So he was happy, I was happy, I'd done a really good job. He went away, but the bit I was curious about was the bit where we started talking about time. Now, when we think about building somebody's financial plan, actually time is really important, because time is the bit that's finite. It's the bit we know that's going to run out eventually. And it's the bit that actually is probably more valuable than the money. And interestingly, when a lot of people come and speak to me, they realize they're probably spending their time in ways they don't want to, and they want to make a change. But time's the important bit. So I'm always curious about asking clients about time. I said to him, what are you going to do now? I've given you this news. He went, well, I'm not enjoying work, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to quit the job. And I'm going to do all those things in the house that I've said to my wife I'm going to be doing for years, and actually I'll need to get them done. So he did that. So that was helped him with his financial plan mid 2021. Got to the end, told him he'd never run out of money again coming into 2022. And at the start of 2022, he said, right, okay, I think I'm going to leave. Put his notice in, and for 9 months he did all that stuff in the house. So he made sure that the house was done. Stuart, on the 3rd of January 2023, I get a WhatsApp from him. And do you remember those old screw fix airplane model things? You know, the ones you glue together?
Yes.
So he just sends me a photo of one of those, like a Messerschmitt or some old World War II plane, completed, right? So he'd like glued it. And the message on the bottom was, Chris, what have you done with my life? This is how I spend my time now. And actually, what it made me realise, and since then I've been thinking about this a lot, and the book that I'm writing at the minute is going to explore this in a bit more depth, is about the other elements we need to consider, the full picture, the full package we need to consider when thinking about our financial plan. Raz, can you share the screen for me again? So far I've written 2 books. They're quite diverse. One's a technical book about pensions. One's a book about kindness. For those who know me quite well, I host a podcast with my daughter where we talk to people who are doing good in the world and share their stories, and that's built a decent audience over the years. So much so that I wrote a book about kindness, and that all of the money from that is going to an amazing cause, St. Francis Hospice, near where I live in Essex, who do amazing work. So if you do pick up a copy of that book, and I'd encourage you to do so, it's been reviewed quite well. Be rest assured that all of the money is to go into an amazing cause. But what I am now is halfway through the next book, and the next book is going to be called What Happens Next. And it's about the challenges we face, both financially, but also from different perspectives, about navigating that next stage of our lives. What do we do, and what do we need to consider when we're thinking about making change? Now, what we've done is built a bit of a framework around that, looking at purpose and values at its core. What gets us up in the morning and what motivates us. Financial well-being is important, and financial well-being, knowing you've got enough, never to worry about running out again, is a hygiene factor. There's loads of evidence to say that £10 million or £50 million won't make us any happier, or if it does, it's only marginal. But knowing we've got enough, knowing that we can sleep at night, knowing that we'll never run out of money again is really important. And the other element of financial well-being people don't consider enough is how to spend money to make us happy. There's an amazing book called Happy Money by a lady called Elizabeth Dunn. She's a American professor, psychology professor. Certainly, if you want to sort of know a bit more about that, I definitely pick that up. Physical well-being, having the energy and the drive to do things is really important. So, if you're thinking about what's next in your life, financial is one. Staying physically able to do the things you want to do with your life is really important. Emotional well-being is really important. Making sure that we maintain good mental health is fundamental. But let's be clear, that old traditional view of retirement, for a lot of people, isn't that attractive anymore. It's that element of saying, what do I do to keep my brain ticking? Now, for some of my clients, it's non-executive directorship work. For some of my clients, it's continuing running their business. But the important thing is, does it give you that intellectual challenge without being too much stress that's going to have a negative impact on your life? How do we maintain that element of intellectual challenge? And then community and social well-being. So what do we do to maintain relationships and build relationships in our life?
Sorry, Chris. I was just thinking as you're talking about that, because there's been a very interesting connection between you and I regarding that next framework, hasn't there? Because across my work, I came across somebody who was looking for a bit of help in his post career. Guy called Tom Spite, and Tom and I connected, and we were talking, and I realized that what he'd done, and he was very much into what you can do with your life after you so-called retire. He was a thoracic surgeon. And when he retired, he got quite depressed because his purpose, his life, was in his work. It was about teaching. It was about his patients. It was about the surgeries, and his life basically he felt came to an end. But he found a new purpose, and it was around him sort of working with people who had that sort of issue, who had post-traumatic stress disorder after they came out of things like the military. And I know, Chris, I know you had a conversation with him regarding this, and he's a perfect example of somebody who's had to put those values back into his life following his retirement, because his retirement meant that he had no purpose. And having a purpose at the end of your retirement, or even into your retirement, absolutely critical to everything you do.
And my sense of that, and Tom, thank you for introducing me for Tom, because that conversation was absolutely
he's a fascinating guy. Absolutely
fascinating.
I'm writing
the book, Tom comes back to me, and we need to arrange another conversation. So
he's a fascinating character because the way he approaches things.
I can use his insight. But certainly that element of saying, I've trained hard, I've worked hard to be the best that I can be at this particular occupation, only to then, on a particular arbitrary age and date and time, say it's all over. And I sort of get why that happens. They want to make sure that people are able to do it. But certainly my feeling is that if we can empower people with the knowledge that, you know, retirement actually might not suit retirement in its conventional sense, you know, spending all the time in leisure, for a lot of driven people might not suit them. It might encourage them to think about what they might want to do after a little bit sooner.
Absolutely right.
If they do
And
that,
you know,
then they can build their plans.
I mean, I'm sure I'm sort of taking us off down into sort of some of the work I do, but you know, one of the things I do is work with people who sort of because the complete approach is all about, as I say, I'm the scientific value builder. I'm about building value in your business. I'm about getting it to the stage where it can become an asset that you can do something with. And I come across a lot of people who will say to me, I want to sell my business. And you go, okay, so when are you thinking of selling? And they went, oh, about 6 months. And you look at that and go, it's probably not. It's probably not possible at this stage because you haven't set it up for that. Thinking about moving into phases of life shouldn't be 6 months and then it's the next day. It has to be a plan that you start thinking about 2, 3, 4, 5 years in advance, because it takes that long to make the transition. It takes that long to get everything lined up, and it takes that long for you to actually accept that that's what you're going to do when you've got that thing that you're going to take it into.
100%. So that was the next framework. I'm still working on the book. But here's my ask. Here's my big ask. If you've got any insights, if you're watching this and you've got any insights that you can share about this process, if you've been on the journey, if you've had experience of helping people through this journey, reach out, because I'd love to hear from you. I mean, what I want to do with this book is just make sure it adds as much value as possible and supports people to make that transition, not only from a financial perspective, but in all areas of their life. And I'm a firm believer in collaborating to do that. And like Stuart mentioned, speak to people like Tom, who have got real insights into this sort of stuff. So please do reach out, share your knowledge, share sort of the things that worked and haven't worked in your experience, and I'd be happy to have and open to have a conversation about that. So Stuart, let's talk a little bit about you, because as you say, our fates are a little bit aligned, aren't they? Because if you've got business owners who are looking to make that transition, one of the areas of expertise I need for my clients is helping make sure they get the best value out of their business. So before we start about this, we talked about the science first. Give me a bit of an indication of what's got you to where you are today.
So yeah, I built a fairly substantial and successful scientific career actually working with persistent viruses. So I was a dyed-in-the-wool virologist long before the rest of the world became an armchair virologist about 3 years ago. So my background was that I was always keen to do that at school. Although interestingly, when I was at school, we entered into these sort of build your own business clubs, and for some unknown reason, every time we did, my team always sort of won these things because I would be sort of doing things that were a bit different and a bit unusual and would capture attention. So clearly it was there from a young age, but I went into the sciences because they absolutely fascinated me, and it was whilst I was there I discovered a couple of things that were really key to that. One of which was I was passionate about making things better. Science is all about sort of trying to improve. It's about doing something, then seeing what you can do with it. It's about taking one thing, changing something, and then seeing what happens if you do that. So it's about the experiments. So for me, I was always pushing to make things better. And the hospital I was a part of, I actually helped to build a reporting system to try and report results from the lab that I was part of out into the rest of the hospital, because I could see how much time it was taking for people in the lab to do things with bits of paper and such like, and they'd lose the bit of paper. And I wanted to improve that. So I started doing that whilst I was doing my research. And then I discovered the power of the internet. And in fact, long before the internet became the internet, I was involved in trying to sort of put the bits of my science, which was all about genes, onto the internet so that other people could actually share them. And I had conversations with some really interesting people around the world. And I came to the conclusion do you know, I'm going to go and do something with this rather than what I'm doing with my science. And it was that which powered the early part of my career when I sort of started up a couple of small businesses. And what I learned then, yes, it was good fortune. I happened to be sort of in the right place at the right time, but also I got a lot of things wrong. And what I've learned from those business failures is probably more enduring from some of the success, because the thing that you discover in business is, if you keep doing, and this is where the science comes back in, if you keep doing the same thing, you'll get the same result. So you've got to change something.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something wrong and it's not working, you've got to change. And the one thing that the science taught me was change one thing at once. Don't change 17 things, because you can't tell which bit's helping you to make it get right. But the other thing is, go and take as many different lessons from what you can see around you, work out what's going to work for you, and then apply it in your situation.
Yeah.
And that, that's the element of what scientific research is about. It's about keeping things steady when it's steady, and making things as easy to follow as you can so that you can make it repeatable. But if something's not working, well, find out why, and then make one change.
Yeah. I mean, it's that element of incremental gain, isn't it? I like the Dave Brailsford, the Sky cycling coach guy, who, I think the big story was, like, he went into a hotel once and said, the mattresses are a bit soft, we need to make them harder. And everybody's going, well, why are you looking to change the mattresses in the hotel rooms? And he said, well, it's probably, we can test it, and if it improves performance by 1%, and we do 100 small things that incrementally improve, the performance of the athletes, then we're in a position where we've got 100% better athletes. And I think in business, you like being able to test stuff. You keep and use stuff that works, but actually be robust enough to turn around and go, you know what, this isn't working, we're going to stop it.
Yeah.
Is really important.
Yeah.
What do you reckon stops people from doing that?
Well, I think there are two things. One of which is, this is something that I find quite a lot of the time. There's a lot of us, we're business owners. We go into this and we're doing something which we enjoy, but we think we're sort of reasonably good at. And when you sort of turn around and go, well, we could do that better, they'll go, well, this is the way we've always done it. It's always worked.
Yeah.
And the answer is, actually, it's not working. But you don't want to look for that. And one of the elements I found as a scientist was, we're hypercritical. Now, I don't want to be critical. I don't want to start getting into the politics now. But if you listen to a politician, they're very good at saying everything's fine, nothing needs to change. The one thing a scientist will say is, there's always something that you can change. Always. Yeah. There's always something you can learn. Always something you can do better. So one of the things that I talk to people about is, there's no fear in saying, what about if we tried it differently? You go to, your book, what next? What about, what could we do next? What would we do? Too often we're sort of sitting there going, no, we don't want to make that change because I don't know if it will make things better or worse. Well, one of the things I used to do as a scientist, I would have a sort of standard way I was doing it. And I would take, say, 10% of my stuff down a different path, which I was going to test if a new idea would work. So I might sort of have 100 different samples, and I would do 90 of them with one solution and 10 of them with another. And I'd see which one of them actually produced the better results. And you go, okay, the new way of doing it has produced a 20% increase. So we funnel everything down to 20%, down to 10%. And so you're not risking everything by making changes all the time. What you're doing is you're testing different variables, and you're seeing which one works. And I do it now with marketing. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying, I've just bought a list of 5,000 email addresses. We could debate the merits of doing this, but they bought a list of 5,000. They went, which letters should I send? And that's another thing. Letters are really good at the moment for getting response rates. Emails are just dreadful, but you'd be amazed at letters. So they said, so which shall we do 2.5 on each letter? And I went, no. What you do is we take 1,000 and we'll do 500 with one letter and 500 with the other. And what you do is you measure the response rate of those 500. The winner gets the other 4,000.
Gotcha.
Because otherwise you'll get a good response rate from 2,500 and a poor response rate.
And
The
you've
other side.
wasted the opportunity to, yeah.
So the better way of doing it is to actually sit there and go, no, how do I maximize my success? And the answer is do a test, then send the rest of your stuff down the successful route. So too often people are there going, oh, well, wait a minute. A/B testing is all about splitting it two ways. Well, yeah, it's about splitting it two ways, but it's actually about splitting it two ways after you've been successfully testing
small
something.
test, and then you've got
big,
routes.
Yeah, and they got a great impact from that because, of course, we tested it. We got the better letter, which got the better response rate, and they actually got a real flood of leads, which they actually turned around to me and said, "I can't cope," and it was like, well, that's okay. It's a good situation to be in, actually.
You know what's interesting? I mean, and again, when I have conversations like this, I always think about how it applies to my own business. And Cervello, by its nature, isn't that we only accept referrals. We only get referrals in, and that's through introductions and relationships we've built sometimes over years. And actually, those relationships then mean that we've got really deep relationships. How do you test that? How do you test something so intangible as a really deep relationship of trust?
Yeah, do you know something, Chris? It's something we don't often do. We don't often do those sort of asking for the feedback, and that's another thing which I'm really keen on doing. People worry that feedback is going to be negative, and my answer to that is always really quite simple.
If it is, right.
Yeah, negative feedback isn't negative unless you want to make it negative in your own head.
Yeah.
You can treat it as somebody who's trying to help you. I talked. I could talk for hours about the problems people foresee about sort of asking for feedback, and it's always about, well, I don't want to hear the bad news. Well, it's not bad news if you turn around and go, that's useful. I'll make some use of that.
Yeah.
I test everything by asking people to give feedback, and one of the ways that I'm using feedback now is one of the ways that doesn't sort of seem all that intuitive, and that's to sort of do what you might sort of call a post engagement review, where somebody else sits down and has a video conversation. And it might only take 5 or 10 minutes, but in that 5 or 10 minutes, you can unpick things which are both good and bad, but also you get some great stuff that you can actually use on your social media and things like that. So if people are prepared to have we're used to it now. We're doing this over Zoom. I know you and I have met in person, but we often do things nowadays over Zoom and things like that. If people are more comfortable with just sort of sitting in front of a camera going, yeah, I'll have a 5-minute conversation with you. And that 5-minute conversation, you can just tease the sort of like, well, can you expand on that a bit more? And can you just tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah.
And then you get to sort of, some real nuggets, but also one or two things are going to come out in that post-engagement interview where you can actually go, do you mind if I just crop that out and use that 20 seconds in my marketing material?
It's so funny. We did this about 2 years ago, and I've got a number of clients who want to do this for us now again. And we've asked them to do it, but I need to set a date and get the logistics sorted. But a couple of years ago, we got a really amazing guy. I want to give him a shout out on Cervello Live. A guy called James Cook from Foster Studios. He's based in around the corner in my office. Young guy, used to do all the videos for Secret London. Still does some amazing work for Hamleys and stuff like that. And I said to him, look, come along and record some of our clients talking about how they feel Cervello helps them. What was really interesting about it is I felt really awkward staying in the room. So I said to James, I said, look, just ask whatever you want, ask whatever you feel is appropriate. And I'm just gonna, every time you interview a client, he wanted to do some like video of us chatting and stuff like that. But every time you actually ask a question, I'm gonna leave. And it's the day that I drank the most coffee, because we had 8 of our clients in, and every time a new client came in, I was off getting another cup of coffee downstairs. But you know what? What was interesting about that process, and thankfully they all said pretty nice stuff about us, but I agree, sometimes the negative stuff you can learn from. the interesting thing is what we felt they valued was different to what they valued. And
Yeah.
having somebody independent ask that question brought that out. I found that fascinating. It was absolutely brilliant. And I suppose the other thing that I was going to mention, and again, one thing that we've done at Cervello that's worked really well is client panels. So if you assume that clients have got your best interest at heart, which if they've got a long-term relationship with you, they do, client panels have worked really well. Getting 5 clients together, saying we've got this challenge that we want to improve within our business. We're very lucky to have clients who've got decent levels of smart people with decent levels of expertise. Getting 5 people in a room and saying, help me improve my business so we can improve our service to you, and being brave enough to do that is super powerful.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Really good thing